Okay, let's get started. Any questions from last class? I don't think. So some of you have a couple of questions regarding the presentation, maybe in 2 or 3 weeks. So let me clarify some of the rules and policies. So what I expect, no written report is required. On slide, okay? So you have to submit the slide by the deadline, which is, I believe, 20th April. But some of you requested for the extension. So I decided to extend for everyone 23rd April. So you have 3 more days to work on. So 11:59 or before midnight, 23rd April. If you know the policy, that's fine. Other than that, if you submit the slide, you cannot edit. After you submit the slide, I'll bring the slide for you on the presentation day. Only the slide required, no written report. Now, some more questions like, should we do separate, should we do together? So the idea is, I prefer do together. One of you will be working on one specific currency, but if you do together, the good thing is you will learn what the other group member is working on. One more currency. So I prefer do together. Okay, one slide, 2 currencies. Maybe the first presenter can talk about the first currency. After the presenter is done, you can talk about the second currency. The second presenter can talk about the second currency. About the timing. As a group, 2 people, at least 10 minutes. At least talk about 10 minutes, 2 people, 5. But there is no time constraint. If you want to talk more, that's fine. But at least prepare for 5 minutes each, 10 minutes as a group. And I prefer to cover these topics on your slides. Talk about most of the things we learned throughout the class. Make sense? So any questions? Like, if you have, we can go over about the policies, how to prepare for the presentation, what to expect. Good so far? Okay, yes. Midnight, before midnight, 23rd April. So I extended 3 days. We good? Move on to our topics. So in the last class, we were talking about why any MNCs or why any corporations need to forecast exchange rate, right? We talk about the reasons, 5 reasons. Then we talk about technical forecasting. Now, today we're going to talk about in details fundamental forecasting. So when we talk about fundamental forecasting, it is basically based on theories and relationships. So we have to understand if there is a fundamental factor changes, what should be the impact on the currency rates? Let's say two countries in this world. That used to be the inflation. Right now, let's say. After some months, if inflation for USA becomes 7%, UK stays the same. What is the expectations? What should be the impact on the currency rate? Approximately by 2%, right? So one of the very established way to forecast exchange rate based on fundamental factors is basically regression. We know that theoretically, regression equation looks like that. This is our dependent variable. This is the intercept. And this is our coefficient times independent variable. If we think about this relationship, hypothetically, if we think about this relationship, this point is basically our A or intercept. Can you see here? And then this slope is basically our B, the coefficient of X. So ideally, if we say this is, let's say, 2, let's say hypothetically this is 2, and B is 0.5, the relationship, the slope is 0.5. That means for any changes of 1 unit of X, Y should increase by half unit, right? But when X is 0, Y is still 2, right? When X is 0, let's say when X is 0, right? After that, any changes in X by 1 unit, Y will increase by half unit. Why the relationship is positive? Because this is positive. Now, if we want to convert this equation in the fundamental forecasting setup, in our fundamental forecasting, spot rate, right? Foreign currency at time t, spot rate, foreign currency at time t. We just rename A as B0, B0. Rename B as B1. Inflation differential at time t. Inflation differential, not the absolute inflation, okay? Inflation differential at time t. Make sense? To more explain, in this setup, what is the expectation? B0 should be 0, because if you remember purchase power parity line, if you remember the purchase power parity line, that basically intersect through the center. So when X is 0, Y is also 0, right? When there's no changes in the differential of inflation, there should not be an impact on the, right? In that case, if this is the expectation, and just assume, let's say B1 is 0.7. Assume B1 is 0.7. If inflation changes by 2% for this example, foreign currency should appreciate by 1.4%. This is the estimated model. In reality, we should expect B1 should be 1, right? 1-to-1 relationship. But sometimes real data may not give you the actual relationship, right? In reality, you should expect B0 is 0 because when there's no changes in the differential, there should not be an impact on the spot rate, right? However, this should be 1-to-1 relationship. 2% increase, 2% decrease. There should be exactly 2% impact on the spot rate, right? Make sense? So for fundamental forecasting, we can start from the relationship first. We have to be careful. We have to be careful. It should be positive or negative relationship, right? And how should this intercept look like? We have to know the fundamental relationship. Then we can use the raw data to estimate B1. Make sense? This is one of the good way to think about fundamental forecasting. Now, we have to be careful about this X. We have to be careful about X. So what does it mean? Sometimes any changes in the fundamental factors have instantaneous impact on the spot rate. Inflation changes right now, spot rate should also change right now. However, sometimes it takes time, maybe 1 quarter, 2 quarter, 1 month lagged. Last month changes in the inflation has impact on this month's spot rate. Make sense? If this is the reality, we have to be careful. When we say differential change in inflation of T, that means current changes in inflation has impact on the current spot rate. However, when you say T minus 1, last month or last period or last quarter's changes in inflation has impact on current spot rate. So long story short, when we are doing fundamental forecasting, first important factor, understand the relationship about the equation. Second important factor, whether the factor has a lagged impact or whether the factor has an instantaneous impact. If the factor has a lagged impact, current spot rate is basically impacted or explained by lagged factor. When the spot rate has an instantaneous impact, current spot rate is basically impacted by current factor. And we have to be careful. Because there are several reasons. Sometimes we really don't know sometimes we really don't know the fundamental factor time to time. Do we know the inflation value for the month of April of USA? How recent do we know? If you Google, just Google on the, all of you, most of you have cell phone or laptop or iPad, just Google the most recent inflation data you have for USA. You can go to CPI index, you can just Google the most recent, and what do you have? Huh? April 4? But this is published on April 4 of which month's inflation? Last March inflation? Yeah, is it a March, a February, January, which month? March? Okay. Do we have spot rate today? What is the latest spot rate we know? Today? Right? If you want to know the spot rate between US and UK, we know that spot rate right now. Exactly, let's see. If you Google exactly April 13, 12 o'clock, 17 minutes, right? We should have the spot rate right now. But on the other hand, for inflation, we have 1 month lag information, right? So that's why you have to be careful. Because sometimes you don't have the current data, and that's why it is tough to build the relationship. Tough to build the relationship. On those cases, we have to rely on select variable. This is completely your decision choice. You have to be careful which variable you should use. Make sense? Any questions so far? Okay. So far, we only talked about one factor at a time, right? But do you think, if you think of the fundamental one that impact spot rate, there's only one factor or multiple? Multiple. So this equation that we are trying to explain is basically a partial picture. We are trying to look at partial picture. So the comprehensive model should include the comprehensive model. Change in inflation, change in interest, change in income level, change in local control, change in expectation. That should be 5. That's a comprehensive model. Same regression setup. And these estimates, positive and negative, will tell you how tomorrow's spot rate should be determined based on those changes. At the same time, you have to be careful. Do you want current? Do you want lagged? But the appropriate model to forecast foreign exchange rate is basically using all of those fundamental factors at a time together, So this is how fundamental forecasting works. If you think about, there are a lot of banks, financial institutions, or a lot of third-party research institutes that give the forecast. They basically use those fundamental concepts. Based on that, they give the forecast. What should the foreign exchange look like tomorrow, 1 month later, 1 quarter later, or in the long run? That's basically based on fundamental forecasting. Now, some problems of fundamental forecasting. Unknown timing. Do you know what does it mean? Unknown timing of the impact of some factors. Because right now we have the current spot rate, but right now we have 1 month lag inflation. This is USA, developed country. That's why we have 1 month lag inflation. If you go to frontier countries, emerging markets, Sometimes you have 6 months lag inflation. 6 months lag inflation. If this is the reality, how can you decide which factor fundamentally affecting the spot rate? So it's tough to decide which factors fundamentally affecting the spot rate. And also sometimes those factors have impact in a late way. Even if inflation changes this month, consumers, producers, manufacturers may need time to change the decision. It takes time to switch from expensive manufacturer to cheap manufacturers because of inflation, right? As a result, demand and supply of foreign currencies inventory also takes time. And that's why even if we know the inflation data, even if we know what should be the expected changes on the exchange rate, it takes time to be reflected in the price, right? Even if we know, let's say Walmart in, do you know what is Macon? 30 miles south from here. Even if we know Walmart in Macon is 20% cheaper than Walmart in Kirksville, it takes time to decide, to make a decision that from tomorrow, we will start shopping only from Macon, not from Kirksville, right? As a result, it takes time so that the Walmart in Macon will experience higher sales, Walmart in Kirksville will experience lower sales, demand and supply mismatch. So it takes time. Even if we know products are expensive in USA, it takes time to import from UK. So there is a delayed impact. So there are some limitations. Some factors may not be easily quantified. Can you remember in the last month we were talking about there's an airlines company here in India, they actually ordered a lot of airlines from Boeing and Airbus. Now, what if there is a labor strike in Boeing? What do you think? What is the implications if there is a labor strike in Boeing? If there's a labor strike in Boeing, what do you see and implications? For Boeing, for US, for what? Any idea? Do you think the sales of Boeing gonna go up or go down? Go down. So if the sales of Boeing gonna go down, it's one of the biggest manufacturer here in the US for airlines. Do you think the income level of US gonna impacted or no impact? Positive way, negative way? Negative way. So his income level is a fundamental factor of forecasting foreign exchange rate, right? Right? So that means if there's a labor strike in Boeing and sales gonna go down, income level gonna go down, that should be an adverse impact on the spot rate for home currency of US, right? But is it easy to quantify? There are so many factors. If you read newspapers, so many factors that actually impacted this foreign exchange rate, but we really don't know how to quantify. And that's one of the limitations. If you think about fundamental factors, that's one of the limitations. So let's say there is an NFL final is going on. Like this year, Kansas City Chiefs play with whom? Eagles. What did we do on that time? Think about average populations, what they did on that time. And watching the game. Yep. Did you see any impact for this on productivity? Maybe the game is going on for a lot of people's working hours, right? So there may be a decline in the productivity. So there are so many things going on around the world or around the country that actually affect any of the fundamental factors here, which is really, really tough to quantify. So that those fundamental forecasting models may not work because of those limitations. Finally, regression coefficient may not remain constant. When you say regression coefficient, we are talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many of you take the matrix class regression? You should, 1 or 2 maybe. No one. No one have ever taken economics class regression. No. So basically, if you run a regression output. So when you say output means all those values, okay? B1, B2, B3, B4, B5. So here we assume 0.7 is B1 value, right? So all those outputs are basically dependent on your sample size. Let's say we want to forecast the spot rate in 2023 based on last 5-year data. Based on last 5-year data. We will get certain values for those 5 factors. But if you think we need to change, we will run the regression based on last 10-year data. You will definitely have different values for this. Regression is very, very specific to sample size of the data you're using. So that's why regression coefficient, this one will change time to time, depending on what data you used. So as a result, if you run a regression, get some coefficient, and you're trying to say, if inflation changes by 2%, spot rate should change by 2% times 0.7 is not always true. It's not a universal truth like sun rises in the east. It's a partial truth because this is dependent on the data you used. If you change the data, if you increase or decrease the data size, this 0.7 could be 0.8, 0.9, 0.6. So your interpretation or explanation gonna change. Make sense? Questions so far? Now move on to the last factor of forecasting, which is market-based forecasting. So if you can remember, we know that forward trade is a function of spot trade 1 plus premium, right? This spot trade means right now, the current trade, right? This forward trade means how much the dealers are quoting. And the dealers and financial intermediaries are quoting, right? Both are basically based on market, right? You can get both of this data if you go to Bloomberg, if you go to any financial intermediaries, they're going to give you the data between USA, or whichever currency or country you choose, right? Now, based on that, we also can calculate what should be the premium, right? If you know current spot rate is $1.10 for each British pound, and forward rate is basically $1.30 for each British pound. From that, we can calculate the premium, right? We can do that, right? Or on the other hand, if you know the spot rate and the premium, you can calculate the forward rate, right? Easy equation. So market-based forecasting is trying to tell you expected change in the spot rate. Expected change is basically if you want to forecast, let's say there's an MNC who is going to have some payables or receivables from UK. MNC needs to know what should be the future exchange rate 1 month from now. And they don't want to do technical and fundamental forecasting because they don't trust that. What they can do, go to the market, they can look at the premium and they can think about, okay, the premium is 5% or 10%, forward trade or future exchange rate should be something like that. 1 month from now, I can expect the exchange rate should be something like that. When I will have those payables and I have to convert to money. So market forecasting is basically based on data from the market. You can forecast what should be tomorrow. So the good things of market-based forecasting is they actually help you for long-term forecasting. If you can remember, international Fisher effect or international interest rate parity, we know that we can get to know the interest rate for different maturity, like 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, right? And from that differentials, we can build a forward premium, right? So that's why market-based forecasting is basically helping you to think about long-term forecasting. You can also do mixed forecasting. Mixed forecasting is nothing but a combination. So what is mixed forecasting? Nothing but a combination of technical, fundamental, and market-based. You want to forecast the exchange rate between USA versus UK. Right now, spot rate 1.1. If technical forecasting is telling you it should be 1.2, fundamental telling you 1.15, market is telling you 1.25, right? You use 3 different models: technical, fundamental, and market-based. These 3 different models are giving you 3 different forecasts for next month. Now, what do you want to do? You want to run a mixed forecasting model. So the mixed forecasting model is basically an weighted average. Weighted average. If you think you trust more market-based, let's say if you trust more market-based, you can give 50% weight here, completely up to you. If you trust fundamental more than technical, you can give 40% weight on there. You don't trust technical a lot, you can only give 10% weight on there. Make sense? Now, your mixed is a function of so this is your mixed forecasting for the foreign exchange rate. It's a combination. Now, you just wait, depending on which one you trust more, and then find the forecasted exchange rate. You can play with this. This waiting, it's up to you. You can decide how much to wait. You can also think of, I don't trust market-based. It's manipulated. Because very few financial institutions, they actually have a syndicate, they manipulate this, so I don't trust this. You can say, let's wait on 30%. You think this is some macro variables that represent the real economy, that represent the spot rate better tomorrow? 60%. You don't trust technical again, 10%. Now this weighted average should be your forecasted exchange rate. So mixed forecasting is basically coming from the different models so far we have learned: technical, fundamental, and market-based. Sometimes you may not trust your own quality. You can go to the third party which provides the forecasting. So sometimes big corporations, they don't do it by themselves. What they do? They go to big banks, big securities, big research firms, and ask, what do you think in 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, the exchange rate between US and UK should be? And they just pay for the service. You can think about it's just a service. You just pay for the service. Now, this is the summarization what we learned so far. So please go through these tables at your own and try to understand how those forecasting happen in these 3 different models: technical, fundamental, and market-based. Now, forecasting has a lot of problems. Can you forecast tomorrow 100% accurate? Is it going to be warm or cold tomorrow? Is it going to be warm or cold next week? Any tornado coming next week? Do you know it right now? We can make a forecast, right? Do you think it should be 100% correct? So that's why it's really, really important. It's really, really important to estimate the forecasting error. So this is the formula. So the absolute forecasting error is basically forecasted value minus realized value divided by year. Be careful about this straight line. Do you know what does it mean? Huh? What does it mean to use these two straight lines on the numerator? Absolute difference. Absolute difference. So let's say we forecasted USA and UK exchange rate 1.35. Around 10%. Right? So our forecasting now is around 10%. So be careful, there are different implications. Using absolute, using non-absolute. When you use the absolute differences, so we're trying to only understand the error. It doesn't matter. Error is on the positive side, error is on the negative side. We are just trying to understand. When you're running technical model, when you're running fundamental model, when you're running market-based model, we're just trying to understand how wrong our model is against the actual value 2 months from now. Today we are forecasting 1 month or 2 months future value, but when we reach 2 months from now, when we reach the time being in reality, the realized value could be different, right? Realized value could be different. So it's important to understand how much our model is wrong in absolute directions. When I take it out, this is negative, right? So it means our model is underestimating exchange rate, right? Our model is underestimated. So our model says 3 months from now, 1 British pound should worth $1.35. But when you reach 2 months from now, British pound appreciated more, right? 1 British pound worth $1.50. Underestimating. This underestimating could be a good thing, could be a bad thing for me, depending on my exposure. Depending on my exposure. If I have more British pound, I earn more than my model expected, right? If I have US dollar, I lose. So the thing is that you have to be careful when we do the absolute one. This is only telling you how wrong your model is, but do not tell you what directions. When you take the absolute out, now it's telling you in what directions your model is wrong. Overestimating, underestimating. So the idea is compare the forecast error of so many different models. 3 could be for us. We use to forecast, and then try to find which one has lower forecast error. Which one has lower forecast error? The model with lower forecast error could be a best fit. You should choose the model that has lower forecast error. It is also important, don't test your model for only one period. Let's say we want to forecast only 1 month future. We want to forecast April 2023 to May 2023, right? And based on one forecast, we want to rank. We want to give reward or we want to give penalty one model. No, that's not correct. Keep using the model over time. Keep doing it. Then compare over the time. Which one has lower forecast error? And then going forward, you can choose that model forever. Make sense? Question so far? So here you can look what we are trying to say. So here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So we are trying to test one model for 8 periods. So predicted value by this model, model 1, let's say. These are the predicted values, okay? Predicted values of model 2 for the same currency for 8 different periods. This is the realized value for those periods. Absolute forecaster, model 1, absolute forecaster, model 2. What do you think? Just for these 8 periods, 2 different models. What did you do? Should you use both or one of the other? If one of the other, which one is better? Huh? Why? Average forecast error for model 1 is less, right? Oh, be careful when you make this interpretation. Be careful. This is only based on these 8 periods. Based on these 8 periods, we can say model 1 performed better than model 2. But if we make these 8 periods to 800, you never know. Because I already told you those models, those methods are very, very time specific. They can change the results when sample size, sample periods are changing. Based on these 8 periods, we can say that model 1 is performing better, right? Make sense? There is another way we can think of. One second. Assessing the forecast performance. So this is also a regression model, right? Right? Same thing. Extended. This is known as error term. This is known as error term. In a regression model, it is assumed that in the long run, regression model is assumed that error term, average value of error term is 0. If you run in the one in different fields, keep running the one. So if you look carefully, do you understand the interpretation here? Do you understand the interpretation here? Forward trade at T-1, what this is. At T minus 1 day, there is a forward rate, right? For this period, right? If we agree on a forward rate, if we go back, forward contract, what is the main definition? At day 0, we agreed on price, but we do not execute, right? At day 0, we agreed on the price, but we did not execute. We execute on a forward day. On forward day, on the agreed price, we make the execution, make the transaction, right? So if you read carefully, at T minus 1, there's a forward rate for here, right? When you reach here, the actual rate is basically ST. Actually, when you reach there, on the market, there's a rate going on. This is ST, right? However, if you make a forward contract, we have to bind this contract on this price. So this model is trying to explain whether your pre-period forward rate is able to forecast at the forward date spot rate or not. If you run the regression, be careful, if you run the regression and find that answer is yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because we know that expected value should be 0, right? Make sense? Yes, it is. If not, there is error. There is bias. There is error, there is bias. So this is basically a good assessment of what's going on. So basically, this equation is easily doable. Why easily doable? If we draw the timeline again, when we reach the forward date, we can collect the data from the market, right? And also, we can also collect the historical data. What was 1 month or 1 period back forward rate, right? And if we keep collecting this data for, let's say, last 20 years, 30 years, or 10 years, and then run the regression, then fit the equation and run it in any stress software, we can see, okay, what values we are getting. This is very easy. It may look like it's tough, but how many of you here the investment class? We ran Kaplan model, right? In the Kaplan model, it was can you remember? Expected data is a function of risk-free rate. Target risk premium. It is the same equation. Very easy to run. This is not a statistical class, so I'm not going to teach how to run regression. But if you take a statistics class with me, which I don't teach, then I can show. It's very easy. So if you take the data for last 5, 10, 20, 30 years, you see this is easy to collect this data. Let's say now this is T, March 31st. Let's say March 31st, 2023 is our T. We can easily log into any website, Google, stock market.com, anything we can think the spot rate, right? We can find the spot rate. You can also collect this data from Federal Reserve System, so financial institutions, right? And if we can collect for last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we can think of whether any forward rate for tomorrow is a good predictor of tomorrow's spot rate or not. So that now at time T, we don't know. Now at time T, we don't know this, right? Do we know what should the spot rate tomorrow? We don't know that, right? What you can gather? Forward rate for today, for tomorrow, right? So if we have trust, if we run the regression, we know that whether this is a good predictor or not. If this is a good predictor, it's a really good predictor, using this value, we can say what could be the spot rate at T+1. Make sense? So it's a very good equation, very good predictor. If any of you are trading Forex in future, you guys can follow any of these. It's complicated, but lots of money. Risky money. If you don't get those values, they are not good predictor. Slight deviation doesn't matter. But let's say we ran last 10 years data. Now, forward trade do not predict well tomorrow's. So basically, that means forward trade, today's forward trade is basically 50% of tomorrow's spot trade. Overestimating. Overestimating. If the forward rate is trying to tell $2 should be the tomorrow's spot rate, when you go to the future, spot rate is 50% of that. So overestimating. On the other hand, underestimating. Forward rate today telling us tomorrow's spot rate should be 2. But when you go back in the future, when you go to the future, tomorrow's spot rate is basically 4. Because 2 times 2 is 4. Underestimating. So there's the problem. If you only find this, good credit. Make sense? Question so far. This is a lot of economics and statistics, not finance. So here are some examples. You can just look at it your own. So same situations like this one. Regression coefficients change time to time, not constant. Similarly, the forecast bias. That also shakes time to time, because if you don't get this value of the coefficient, instead you get this value of the coefficient, there is a bias, right? Because forward rate, lagged forward rate are not a good predictor of tomorrow's spot rate, right? So there is a bias. So this bias also change time to time. Okay, sensitivity analysis. Any idea what is sensitivity analysis? What is sensitivity analysis? At least 4 of you can't say we don't know. What is sensitivity analysis? So David, in the BC, did you guys run sensitivity analysis? You should. Sensitivity. You can brainstorm for 1 or 2 minutes. Some of you should know. You remembered, Jacqueline?
Yeah, kind of. It's like basically testing how sensitive like the formula is to different factors changing. So certain ones can change a little bit and changes like the outcome a lot. And it's not going to change a little bit, change the lot.
Almost there, almost there. Just to change, like just to fix one wording. So sensitivity analysis is basically based on changes in one factor. But the definition you said is scenario analysis. Almost there, you're almost right. So if you go back, fundamental forecasting, what we are trying to say, spot trade is a function of 5 factors, right? Now let's say we make these 4 constant, they could not change, okay? But we are only changing inflation, one factor at a time. We can see if inflation goes up by 5%, if inflation goes down by 10%, what is the impact on spot trade? But this 4 count, this is something. So for the BC, you guys can do the same thing by playing with the cap and playing with the cap and mod. You can think of beta is not constant forever, right? Also, the expectation for market model is not also constant forever, right? So you can think of higher values of CAPM, lower values of CAPM, whether this is giving us a good buy, good sell, good hold, what. You can play the sensitivity. So sensitivity analysis, when we run an equation, when we are trying to look at output, which is dependent on multiple factors, we can change one factor at a time and wanted to see how that one factor is affecting the output. That is called sensitivity analysis. So if you can remember the very first example we did, we assumed that B1 coefficient was 0.7, right? The very first regression we talked about today. Right? So we assumed B1 is 0.7, right? So if you look carefully, we are trying to talk about multiple values of inflation. Trying to talk about multiple values, only one factor. Inflation. If 1% change in inflation times 0.7%, 2% change in inflation times 0.7, 1.4. So we're trying to talk about if one factor change at a time, what is the impact on the output? So this is a good way. So it's not about you can only play with inflation, you can also play with interest rate, income level, government control, expectations, one factor at a time, and then look at if one factor at a time changes by 10%, what should be my output? Make sense? This is sensitivity analysis. Okay, the final topic for today. So far, what we did. So far, we are trying to forecast spot rate, right? Right? So when you forecast something, and we forecast the very specific one value. So let's say this is the coefficient we have. And let's say we just get to know inflation changed by 2%. So our expectation is spot rate to change by 1.4%, right? If we forecast one value, this is called point estimate. Point estimate. For any forecasting, if we forecast for any variable, one value. So let's generalize. We're trying to forecast the stock price of Tesla tomorrow. If we say the price of Tesla tomorrow is $200, that's it. Fine. But how certain Tesla price tomorrow is $100? Not much, right? Because the stock price of Tesla is highly volatile, right? On the other hand, if we say stock price of Tesla tomorrow will be between 190 to 210, in a range, right? In a range. This is called interval estimate. Point versus interval. So if you think about this way, 190, 210, 200. When you specifically direct one point estimate for tomorrow or future. When you say within a range, Tesla could be anywhere. Interval estimate. So sometimes if volatility is really high, the probability of being point estimate to be true in future is very low. So that's why using the current volatility and other factors, we can think about interval estimate or interval forecast for tomorrow. But the process is exactly the same. We'll try to find the point estimate, and then given the current volatility, we would love to create a range that our forecast of this asset should be within that value. Make sense? Question so far? All good? So I believe we are done of chapter 9. So if you have no questions, then see you next Tuesday.